kind of like one of those cliche moments in movies, when somebody gets into a taxi and the taxi driver looks through the mirror and says, "Where to, miss?" And she says, "Home. I want to go home." Right? And in real life, a taxi driver would be like, "Lady, I just need an address." It's the exact same thing that's happening when you don't give clear guidance to your virtual assistant. So the question is, okay, how do I give guidance? How do I give this clarity to my virtual assistant? There are a couple of things that every entrepreneur needs to have when they work with their team. So in this episode, we want to discuss how you can make sure you get the most out of your virtual assistant if they are the right person. Recently, I spoke with a frustrated business owner who said they hired VAs on their own and it just wasn't a good experience. It didn't work out. So they were hoping that our virtual assistants will make a bigger difference in their company. So I was very curious and wanted to know more about what happened, what the problem was, what the situation was, and so on. And so I asked them, okay, what was the problem? What happened? And they said, they just don't get it. Virtual assistants just don't get it. They don't understand what I'm asking for. Their aesthetic is different than mine, and so on. Okay. I think I had an idea of what the problem might be at that point. So in this episode, we want to discuss how you can make sure you get the most out of your virtual assistant if they are the right person. Because sometimes they're just not the right person, and that's okay. But if you do have the right person and you're still not getting the right results, let's get into that actually. So to continue my conversation with the entrepreneur, I asked, okay, imagine you're hiring me. What do you want me to do? How do I know that I'm being successful and that I give you the results you're looking for? And again, the response that I got was pretty vague. They said, well, just, I'm hiring you as the expert, so do whatever you think looks best. Well, here's the problem. What I think looks best and what you think looks best might be two completely different stories. I think this is exactly what happened with the previous virtual assistant, and it could happen again unless there's a better guidance, communication process, standard operating procedures, and so on. Because without these things, it's very hard to give good results. And I'm not blaming the entrepreneur for this because I get it. Managers are very busy people. Entrepreneurs, they're pulled in a million directions. They wear so many hats. They put out so many fires. They don't have the time to necessarily train a virtual assistant or spend a lot of time with them. Because also they're thinking, hey, I'm hiring you as an expert. You should already know this stuff. That's the reason I hired you, to make things easier for me. Well, are they really hiring an expert though? We'll get to that in a second. But first, let's address the number one problem: guidance, communication, training, and so on. Without this, again, you can't really get good results. And this is what's probably a big problem in a lot of companies. And not only that, but it's also very costly to both parties. Now, the entrepreneur will feel frustrated because the virtual assistant is not giving them the results they want. And then the VA will feel annoyed because they were told to go with their gut only to be shut down in the end. So now let's talk about the second mistake, the expert. Are you really hiring an expert though? Because what is an expert? Again, different definition. My definition of an expert and your definition of an expert is going to be different. I look at someone being an expert based on my level of expertise in the area. So let's say, for example, I don't know anything about bookkeeping, and if I hire a virtual assistant to assist me in bookkeeping, I will rely on his or her knowledge to help me in my company. Now, if you run a bookkeeping company and if you are a CPA or you're really familiar with this area and you help an assistant, you wouldn't think that person is an expert. You hire them as an assistant. So the definition of an expert is very different. The definition of an A player has the same thing. It's very different. What I think is an A player and what you think is an A player might again be completely different. So you don't always hire an expert for your business, even though that person may be an expert for someone else. And you don't always have to. So here's the thing. You don't always have to hire someone that's better than you. If you find someone that can do 80% of the work you're doing or work at 80% of your capacity, that's already better because that frees up your time to do better and bigger and more revenue generating activities. So the question is, okay, how do I give guidance? How do I give this clarity to my virtual assistant? There are a couple of things that every entrepreneur needs to have when they work with their team. Number one, you need to have a clear idea of the deliverable. What do you want to receive? What does the result look like? What does success look like? Communicate that to your virtual assistant. Provide examples of what you like, what you don't like, justify why, what you tolerate, what you don't tolerate, and so on. The second thing is prioritize outcomes. Your virtual assistant will not see priorities the same way that you do. When you run a business, you're thinking about scalability, about growth, about how to take it to the next level. Your virtual assistant or your employee or anyone that's working in your business, not on your business, they are thinking about stability. How do I make enough money to provide for my family? How do I make sure that I have a job next month? And so on. So your priorities will be different than a VA's priorities. Therefore, when you say what is important for your business, you are looking at things through your lens. You're thinking, okay, for growth, I need this priority. Your VA is like, for me to keep my job, I need to prioritize this and this. I need to stay in my swim lane. So communicate to your virtual assistant what is important to you. What part of a project needs to be completed first before you move on to the next part, and so on. Number 3 is establish brand guidelines. Communicate, again, what you like, what you don't like, what your brand colors are, what your aesthetic is like. And again, give examples. Give examples of what looks good, what doesn't look good, and why. Tell them why. So the next time they work on a project of yours, they will be like, oh no, that's the example he didn't like or she didn't like, so I'm going to avoid it. They need to know what to double down on and what to avoid to give you what you're looking for. And number 4, set realistic timelines. When you have two parties with completely different ideas of how long it's going to take to complete a project, this is not going to be a successful relationship. So make sure you communicate with your virtual assistant how long it's going to take to get something done. Because here's an example. Let's say if you hire a virtual assistant, let's say for $5 an hour, for example, and you can hire someone locally here in the US for, I don't know, $30 an hour, for example, but that local person in the US can get things done in 1 hour, and the VA takes a whole day, right, to give you the deliverables. Who's going to cost you more in the end? Even though the VA is $5 an hour, because they took so long to give you the deliverable, it's going to cost you a lot more than paying more per hour by hiring someone here locally. So that's why setting the realistic timeline expectations is so important. Before you even hire that virtual assistant, sit down with them and be like, hey, this is what I need, and this is what I need by the end of the week. Can you do this? Because if you don't deliver this by the end of the week, we might have to look a different direction, or obviously it has to be realistic, right? You can't expect to do a lot in a week, but it has to be realistic. So that also sets the standard for the virtual assistant, and you can have a communication or what time frame they can deliver it in, and so on. So all of this needs to be communicated and in writing before starting with virtual assistants. Now, if you're a virtual assistant listening to this, I don't want you to think, oh, great, my company will give me all of that information. I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to wait for the guidelines. Well, sometimes companies don't do this. So it's your responsibility to reach out to them and say that you would like to get on the same page, that you want to provide the best results. So you need to understand what is it that they're looking for so you can give them those results. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, just remember that virtual assistants can read your mind, and their role is not to figure out what you want, but it's to deliver what you request. And a lot of entrepreneurs think that it's easier and cheaper to just delegate a task to a virtual assistant and have them figure it out on their own. And if you watch this show, you know my philosophy is you always delegate responsibilities, you don't delegate tasks. Because when you delegate tasks, you're creating another job for yourself, always coming up with more tasks to give your VA. Instead of when you give responsibilities, they will figure out on their own. And that is true. You want the VA to figure out on their own how to get you that result, to figure out their own tasks, to give you the result you're looking for. But even so, they can't do it without proper guidance or without communication. So that is an investment of your time upfront to make sure you're both on the same page before they can figure out on their own. This is kind of like one of those cliche moments in movies, when somebody gets into a taxi and the taxi driver looks through the mirror and says, "Where to, miss?" And she says, "Home. I want to go home," right? And in real life, a taxi driver will be like, "Lady, I just need an address," right? It's the exact same thing that's happening when you don't give clear guidance to your virtual assistant. When you say, "Take me home," your VA doesn't know what you mean by that. So give them exact instructions, exact guidance, and show them how they can take you home. They will figure out the route on their own, but show them exactly where you want them to take you. And if after all of this, right, let's say you've provided all the guidance, all the SOPs, all the training, all the time, and after all of this, you still don't have a virtual assistant that gives you the results you need, then it's time to part ways. Because sometimes it's the VA's issue, but it's not always a VA issue. And my message from this episode was really to look at ourselves first before we find blame in someone else. Did I give everything that I can to that person for them to be successful? Did I tell them what I want? Did I show them what I want? Did I give them examples? Did I train them? Did I give them feedback? And if after all of this, I still don't see the results, it's time to get a new person, because there's a lot of talent worldwide, a lot of people who would be happy to work with you. You just haven't found the right person. and we're here to help if you are in that situation. I'm curious to know, how do you delegate responsibilities to your virtual assistants? What kind of map do you provide for your VAs to follow? Let me know in the comments if you can. Always happy to be here in front of you. Talk about mindset, talk about how to grow with virtual assistants, how to develop this relationship with them. Also, make sure to check our previous episodes because we talk more about technical stuff like how to write a contract, how to pay a virtual assistant benefits, and a lot more. So anything that you need about virtual assistant, you will find here on this show. So thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to coming here again next week with more valuable information. Talk to you soon.